Mr. President, we will go to the interim findings and observations that have been done so far by the committee, which is on page 5.0, finding and observation. Based on the foregoing, the following findings were observed by the committee. 5.1, that since the inception of the project in 2013, at almost 90% completion, it has not been audited in any form, despite incessant cost variation and allegation of corruption embroiled in the project that the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, ought to have called for this audit under the terms of its contract. 5.2, award of the FPSO contract. The length for the construction of the FPSO, measuring approximately 330 meters in length and 61 meters in width and 33.5 meters in depth. It is also expected to include an oil storage capacity of approximately 2 million barrels. The FPSO will have a topside module with a gross dry weight of 34,000 tons. This was expected to be concluded in 2014. 5.2, Roman figure 2, that NAPIMS and the Local Content Development Monitoring Board, in accordance with the extant procedure, approved pre-qualified tenders in the year 2010. At the end of the screening process, 2 companies were shortlisted, that is Samsung Heavy Industry Limited and Hyundai Heavy Industry, for the final stage of the screening. Roman figure 3, that the Samsung submitted an initial bid of 3.5 billion, whereas Hyundai submitted an initial bid of $3.545 billion by Samsung, while Hyundai submitted an initial bid of $3.522 billion between 17th and 24th of April 2012. NAPIMS held commercial certification with Samsung and Hyundai to enable both companies clarify their bids. After the meeting, both companies submitted a review bid. Samsung submitted a revised bid in a sum of 3.143 billion, while Hyundai submitted its own review bid of $3.140 billion. Roman figure 4, at the end of the process, which spanned a period of 4 years, between 2008 March and 30, 2012, the manager of product sharing contract facility, the general manager of production sharing contract, and the group general manager did a memo to the group executive director of exploration, NNPC, recommending Hyundai for the award of the contract for having tendered the lowest bid. Total Upstream also recommended that the contract be awarded to Hyundai via a memo with reference number EGI/C115. However, despite all of the foregoing, NAPIMS and NNPC awarded the contract to Samsung instead of Hyundai Industries Limited. Roman figure 6, the committee also discovered that there were several allegations against the award of the contract to Samsung against the recommendation of NAPIMS and Total. These allegations centers on fraudulent acts and other abuse of due process by the then management of NNPC in the award of the contract to construct FPSO for OML 130 to Samsung Heavy Duty Industry. Cost variation. The committee observed in its findings that the project cost was estimated to be $6 billion. However, the cost component for the project was reviewed twice in the life of the project. Upon the first review, the cost was revised to $13 billion, and more recently, the cost was further revised and currently over $16.352 billion US. The local content partner, Adeola, and other subcontractors were alleged to have participated in the cost variation in an attempt to earn more commission from the increased project costs. That's relating to Samsung. This was possible as a result of the contract with them were commission-based. It was also observed that Samsung, like several other contractors on the project, had begun making variation on the cost prior to the commencement of the project. The following variations were also observed from the initial contract value. Saipem Contracting Nigeria, initial contract sum, $2.9 billion. Variation from the initial contract sum, $805 million. FMC Technology Techniques, $1.45 billion. Variation, $33.07 million. Duco Limited, $125.6 billion. Variation, $4.5 million. Samsung Heavy Duty Industry Limited, $3.143 billion. And as of today, that variation has gone up to $1 billion US. Bell Oil and Gas Limited, $4.8 million US. Variation, $3.6 million US. Nove Oil and Gas Limited, $163.7 million. Variation, $52 million. The total contract sum is $7.8 billion, where the total variation as at today of this report is in region of about $2 billion US. 5.4, non-adherence to Nigerian content laws and policy. The committee observed that most of the reports on the local content in the project where local contractors and local commission agents fronting for the foreign companies partners at the expense of the Nigerian people, capitalizing on various loopholes in the Logic Act. As a result of these, local companies were seen to be used as a conduit by. For example, Bell Oil and Gas bidded for and got a line pipe contract of about $42 million. But all the pipes that were used were directly imported by Total itself, and about $2 million, not 20, about $2 million was paid to Bell for training fees. There were also several assertions in the oil and gas sector to the effect that several of the planned local engineering activities, design, fabrication, and integration related to FPSO, as well as other elements of the project, were not executed in Nigeria, but in faraway South Korea, Goje, and other related countries, but only imported to Nigeria upon completion. Further observed was the role of Lador as a local content partner to Samsung on the FPSO element of the project was allegedly compromised, as there were allegations that Lador has connived with Samsung to take away the local job, thereby diverting revenue accruing to the federal government. Also observed was the award of contract to companies whose shareholding structure do not reflect the approved percentage of 51% Nigerian and 49% foreign investors. For example, FMC and the Nove Oil and Gas companies are 95% owned by foreign investors, while 2% were owned by Nigerian investors, and they all got contracts in millions of US dollars. Infractions in expatriate quotas and import waivers involving some contractors were observed, e.g., some expatriates that came in for construction companies were sneaked into the oil and gas free trade zone for businesses relating to a general oil field project. In the initial course of the investigation, some infractions were also observed as carried out by some of these companies and were admitted by the Local Content Development Monitoring Board. And this as follows. And these infractions are listed in pages 8 and 9, pages 8, 9, and 10 of the report. And I wouldn't want to bother us with all it, and it includes the names of companies, the package, the infraction against these companies, and the expatriate quota violation. Discrepancies in contract documents. It was observed that most of the contract documents signed by Total and the various contractors different from those submitted to NAPIMS. And by this, what it simply means is that you find out that the contract issued by NAPIMS to these various companies that participated in this project are in variation with what was actually issued out by Total Nigerian PLC. Also, there were documentary evidences from Total showing that value of contract sum under the contract of Sapiem, for instance, is Sapiem, the contract document reads 3.2 billion US dollars. However, a document from the committee derived from the federal government via the NAPIMS NNPC, the contract sum is 2.7 billion US dollars, with a variation of almost 8 or 700 million US dollars. Non-appearance of relevant parties. These have majorly been taken care of, except we have that the MD of the Sapiem Consortium was made up of Sapiem Contracting Nigeria, Sapiem SA, and Sapiem Portuguese. The Sapiem Contracting Nigeria appeared before us, while that of Sapiem SA and Sapiem Portuguese, combined of which got a contract sum of about $1 billion, are not in the country, and as such, they got this contract from Nigeria and moved straight back to their various destinations. They have failed to appear, and the committee have insisted that they must appear, but as of today, it has been very difficult in getting them. For the Samsung chairman, their managing director finally appeared before the committee about 2 weeks ago, but in terms of documentation, the documentation which the MD of Samsung used to come into the country is not acceptable to the committee, and as such, the committee have to send back the chair, the MD of Samsung, for proper documentation with relevant government agency before it finally appear before the committee. Contract payment ratio. At the least contract payment ratio by Total was 80% in US dollars and 20%. However, it was discovered that other major contractors paid their subcontractors less to the ratio received from Total, putting a devaluation and inflationary pressure on Nigerian currency. The table below shows the payment ratio to both the major contractors and the subcontractors. Sir, by this what we mean is that the Total Nigeria paid the major contractors that are 4 in numbers in ratio 90% of their contract sum in dollars, while only 10% of their contract sum in naira. But at the point of payment by Samsung, some of their contractors like Potoseli have their contracts in ratio 60 to 40, 60% in dollars, 40% in naira. Avion 60% to 40%, and so many more like that. And that will reflect, that shows on table in page 11. Recommendation. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I would like to withdraw recommendation 2, pending the time we will come up with the full report of this committee, because that will be part of a permanent recommendation going forward if Nigeria wants to continue to invest in this offshore business. Based on the above findings, and having realized that to conduct a full-scale investigation, there is need to engage professional consultants in the field, as the committee therefore recommends as follows: that there is need for us to carry out a value for money audit as approved for further clarification and investigation by reputable consultants in the following areas of the project. A, in the area of technical, financial, project management, and legal. This is the major recommendation this committee is putting before the Senate, because having carried out the preliminary investigation, there is need for us to go this direction, and to, since the NNPC, who is the major and representative of the federal government team, has refused to carry out, because as we speak, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, there is no one report from NNPC that shows the monitoring of activities of this project for the last 5 years that this project has been in existence. And for us to have a full-blown report that will be acceptable, that will be all-encompassing, that will show in clarity some of the shortcomings that is included in this project, I think there is need for the committee at the Senate to approve for the committee that a team of professionals be put together to carry out a full-blown investigation into the activities of this. I give you an instance, Mr. President. As we speak, $3.5 billion was earmarked for miscellaneous expenditure for this Egina oil field project. And as we speak, Mr. President, about some of $1.9 billion has been expended by Total as miscellaneous expenditure. And when we requested for the documentation that constitute this miscellaneous expenditure, they are frivolous expenses that can be taken care of in the body of the main budget. But because there is nothing to show for, out of this $16 billion project, about $12.6 billion have been expended to date. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I will want to seek for the indulgence of my colleague that this recommendation be approved so that we can conclude this investigation and submit our final report. I so submit, Mr. President. Thank you.
Deputy Leader.